Hello, friends, and welcome to Mousterpiece Melodies, a podcast that's listening to the songs of Disney movies past and present. I'm Josh Spiegel.
And I'm Scott Renshaw. Thanks for joining us on this comprehensive and encyclopedic compendium of all things Disney music. Now playing, from 2010, Tangled.
And before we get into our discussion, thank you for listening. No matter how you're checking us out, we hope you like what you're hearing. And if you are, we'd appreciate it if you could take a minute to rate and review Mousterpiece Melodies on iTunes, Spotify, or whatever app you're using to listen.
That's right. Let everyone know how much you love the show and tell your friends to do the same. You can follow me on Blue Sky at Scott Renshaw and read my film criticism for the Salt Lake City Weekly at cityweekly.net.
And you can follow me on Blue Sky at Mousterpiece and email me at masterpiececinema@gmail.com with any comments, questions, or opinions you'd like to share. Now that all the housekeeping is out of the way, let's start talking about the songs of Tangled. And to do that, we're thrilled to bring into the show a very special guest. He is a former editor at Turner Classic Movies and Collider. He currently is a freelance writer running the commentary track newsletter. Matt Goldberg, welcome to Mousterpiece Melodies. Thanks for being here.
Oh, thank you guys for having me on.
Well, we are delighted to have you on with us, Matt, to talk about the songs of Tangled. This is the 2010 animated film from Walt Disney Animation Studios. It is, in fact, the 50th animated feature from Walt Disney, as they helpfully remind us at the opening of the film. The songs here were composed by Alan Menken and Glenn Slater. This is, of course, a long in the works adaptation of perhaps one of the most classic fairy tales of all time, Rapunzel, about the beautiful young maiden with the extremely long head of hair trapped in a tower who is rescued by a handsome prince, or in this film's case, a moderately charming fellow whose nose is never correctly drawn on all those wanted posters. Now, obviously, this movie is only about 15 years old, turns 15 later this year. I'm curious for the two of you, Matt first, and then Scott, then I'll go. Just kind of generally, if you can recall your initial reaction to Tangled as an overall film. We'll get into the track by track discussion in a few minutes, but let's start kind of just generally. What was your reaction to the movie back in the halcyon days of 2010?
When I first saw it, I'm like, oh, this is pretty good. I wasn't as in love with it as Princess and the Frog, which came out the year prior, but I was like, this is a pretty good. This is definitely a huge step forward for their CG animation, and I thought the songs were solid. I've revisited it a few times over the years, and I still think it's like a nice movie, but it never quite hooks me the other way, the same way that other Disney musicals do. I think it's not a film that like, Tangled, bad, but it's also not one that I would keep going back to in the same way that I would revisit Aladdin or even Frozen.
Well, I am one who has continued to revisit. I think I thought at the time it was the best Disney musical of the 21st century, and I think I still think that. I think I really was attracted to kind of the return to that Ashman, of course, originally, Menken with Ashman, but this Menken style, it really had the formula, and I love the formula so much in terms of the I Want song and the villain song and the love song and the showstopper. All of those things were there, and I'm like, yes, this is it, and I really love these songs. This is about one of those I'm really thrilled to, because I love every one of these songs.
This is going to be a very interesting discussion, Scott. That's what I'm going to say, because here I'm diving in here head full of steam. I will double down on what Matt said, because I'll be honest with you. When I went to see this movie in November of 2010, I walked in with essentially my arms crossed, with a show me what you've got kind of attitude, because as longtime listeners of the old show know, I love The Princess and the Frog. The Princess and the Frog is my pick for the best Disney animated film of the 21st century. I adore that movie, and I was so bothered by the fact that unfortunately it did not do nearly as well at the box office at the time when it came out in the holiday season of 2009. I feel like there were some, like, there's almost like an inverse aspect of that movie versus Tangled, because when The Princess and the Frog came out, there was a big push of, look, we're doing a full-throated throwback to the Disney Renaissance in some ways, not all perhaps, hand-drawn animated. They brought back the directors of The Little Mermaid and Aladdin and Hercules, John Musker and Ron Clements. Although it did not have Alan Menken composing the songs, it did have Randy Newman writing a handful of songs for that film. Similar to this movie, a film that has, it is an adaptation of a very well-known fairy tale. I would argue, similar to Tangled, it's kind of amazing to believe that Disney had not adapted it prior to the mid-2000s. It's kind of hard to believe it took until 2010 for Disney to make a Rapunzel adaptation. Similarly with The Frog Prince, turning into The Princess and the Frog. And as much as I love The Princess and the Frog, it is undeniable that it didn't do nearly as well at the box office. It barely cracked $100 million domestically. Now, a person listening could say, yes, but you are not a shareholder. What does it matter to you that that movie did not do very well? Well, the reality is it didn't do very well, and thus the future of hand-drawn animation became even bleaker. There's one other Disney hand-drawn animated film, Winnie the Pooh, wildly underrated, buried at the box office by Disney because it was released opposite Harry Potter and the Deathly Hallows Part 2. Big shock, Winnie the Pooh.
Yeah.
I was going to say, big shock, Winnie the Pooh did not do very well that weekend. I saw it that weekend, but most people did not. And I mention it because when Tangled comes out, it's, look, we've got Alan Menken doing the songs. We're adapting a well-known fairy tale. We're doing it all in computer animation. Although this was not the first computer animated film from Disney, it was their first computer animated princess movie. And it was, you kind of get the sense of this is the next frontier of Disney animation. And I walked into it thinking, okay, I really love The Princess and the Frog, and I'm kind of bummed out. And I know that that's not Tangled's fault. I want to acknowledge my antipathy going in, mostly unfair and certainly directed more at Disney from a financial standpoint or from a marketing standpoint. Because I'll tell you, the other thing that always bothered me, still does, I've seen this movie a handful of times over the years. I, of course, knew that this movie is helpfully called Tangled, because if we called it Rapunzel, little boys who want to be big boys, they would not see a movie about Rapunzel, but they'd see a movie called Tangled, apparently. And so there's that.
All the boys who went to go see John Carter.
Yeah, yes. Well, that's just because, who wants to see a movie about Mars? But yeah, I hadn't thought about John Carter in a while. My point here is Tangled did much better than The Princess and the Frog did. It made about $200 million at the box office. And as I left the theater and afterwards, I was like, this movie's fine. It's okay. And I would argue that that extends to the songs. The songs are fine. I don't think that any of these songs are actively bad. I do think this movie has the last great villain song in a Disney animated film. My hot take is that that song is the best song in this movie. And unfortunately, that song arrives about 12 minutes in. But I was going to say, I think I wanted to just clarify one thing I'd forgotten after all the times of watching it. I remembered not only is this called Tangled, I remembered not only does this film get narrated by Flynn Rider, because it's not his, it's a very fun story, and the truth is it isn't even his, which you might be thinking, well, don't be so hard on Flynn Rider. I'm not. That's part of his narration. Literally, in the first 2 minutes of this movie, he says, I wrote it down in my notes, this is a very fun story, and the truth is it isn't even mine. And I then wrote in my notes, then why tell it? Why wouldn't Rapunzel tell that story herself, or not have narration as a frame story at all? And I mention all of that just because even now, the songs here are okay. And certainly it is easy to be nostalgic for the way this movie uses these songs, because even a film like Wish, which Scott and I talked about a couple months ago, kind of tries to be a bit of a throwback to old Disney animation and old Disney songs, and it is a wild flop. It is a failure on almost every possible level. So certainly this movie is much better at utilizing those songs, but I'm not going to pretend like I think these songs are that great. And it's not even so much, I don't want to say it's that I'm comparing it to those Ashman Menken era songs, because that would be even more wildly unfair than I'm being so far. But I think that these songs are not quite as up to stuff. The one thing that I'll say, and Scott, I'm curious, especially from your perspective, aside from the heavy sighs that I feel like I'm hearing from you right now.
Oh, yes. That's all right. It's kind of interesting to be in this position because I'm so used to being a crank about so many things that
on this show you're the crank.
In life in general. I guess it's good to have you as a way to measure myself against. But
well, so here's the thing I specifically want to hear about from your perspective at some point during our discussion, if not now. Last time we spoke, we talked about Robin Hood with Alan Zilberman, a fun discussion, good spirited debate in general. One thing I know I spoke about a lot in that episode is the fact that movie really kind of bundles its songs into a couple of disparate sequences. There's a couple songs in the first 5 minutes, then you kind of wait for about 40 or so minutes, and then there's the final songs. This movie doesn't go quite to that extent. But one thing I had forgotten in rewatching it and kind of focusing on the music, there's only 5 songs in this film, if I want to be generous, because I'm also including the song during the end credits. There are a couple of reprises. There is a reprise of Mother Knows Best. There are, apparently in the soundtrack version, there are 2 separate reprises of When Will My Life Begin. I believe only one of those is actually in the movie, which is odd in and of itself. There's only a few songs in this movie, relatively speaking, and certainly relative to films like Aladdin or The Little Mermaid or Beauty and the Beast. And I feel like in rewatching this movie, there's a lot of space between those songs. And it's an interesting approach and one that I don't entirely think works in its favor. But I know, Scott, you disagree. I don't even have to ask if you disagree. I'm sure that you do.
Yeah.
I know.
Because it's actually objectively not true. They're really just they're not that they are. I mean, at least certainly in comparison to Robin Hood, and of course it's unfair to Matt to put him in a position because he wasn't going to talk about that. But
I don't even know about Robin Hood.
Exactly, Robin Hood. What's that? But it is not remotely the same. It is not. I dismiss your comparison.
Well, that's the beauty of this, is that I edit the show, so I can make sure that my comparison is much louder than your dismissal. No, I mean, I will agree that it's not the same exactly as Robin Hood. I think my point is, and we can begin our track-by-track discussion, we begin with that setup of Flynn Rider, voiced by Zachary Levi, narrating the story of Rapunzel. We get to see a very brief explanation of how Mother Gothel, voiced by Donna Murphy, finds this magical flower that enables her to to stay young. She is able to use this magic flower to stay young, but after the flower is taken by soldiers of a nearby kingdom, although it heals the kingdom's queen, and thus she is able to give birth to her daughter Rapunzel, and the hair contains that magic, Gothel wants to have it for herself. She kidnaps Rapunzel after realizing that by cutting Rapunzel's hair, that actually will rob any magical properties. So she has to take the child for herself, put her in that tower. We get the kind of the setup, including, of course, because it factors into the songs, the use of lanterns released every year on Rapunzel's birthday as a way to guide Rapunzel home. I will just point out that maybe is not the most effective way to draw attention to your child to say, "Oh, those lanterns, those must be from my parents." That's just
okay. I'm going to have to step in here, and I'm going to,
okay, fine.
Does anyone ever actually say it's just a commemoration? It's not "come home, we know you're out there." It's a recognition of the kingdom.
Yeah, my understanding of the lanterns is that they think she's dead. They think their daughter's dead. And it's not a sad thing we do every year.
I will politely disagree. I think that there is a way to see it both ways, at the very least. I understand, of course, that Rapunzel herself is drawn to those lanterns without realizing why for a while. I don't entirely think it's just meant as a commemoration. I think it's also meant as maybe a last-ditch hope from their perspective. But I don't think it's entirely meant as just a commemoration. That said. Again, I realize we are agreeing to disagree. The point is, after this brief narration from Flynn, who is this local ruffian, he is a rapscallion, he is, say, the kind of guy who thinks that Robert F. Kennedy Jr. has the right ideas. I should note, by the way.
Thinker.
Well, I was going to say, I'll note here. At the end of our last episode, I alluded to the fact that, coincidentally, Scott and I have separately met people who appear in this movie. Scott, I believe you interviewed Mandy Moore for the junket for this movie.
That's correct.
Okay. I got to meet one of the people in this film out in the wild, actually at Disney California Adventure. My wife and I were coincidentally there during D23 Expo, even though we weren't attending. And who should we see but Chuck Bartowski himself, free thinker, Zachary Levi. And at that time, I should note, at that time, in the halcyon days of 2017, were we ever so young, Zachary Levi was just Chuck Bartowski / Flynn Rider. I don't believe Shazam had opened at that point. The first one, which was moderately entertaining, I will acknowledge. We got a picture with him, and that is a picture that has now been lost to the ether of the internet because probably somewhere around the whole, RFK Jr., the guy who's basically a sentient box of rocks talking to us all the time. He's got the right ideas. It's like, oh, well, thumbs down, Zach. I wish it had been somebody else in the film. But anyway, the point being, Flynn Rider gives us this narration, it wraps up, and on Rapunzel's 18th birthday, she wants to investigate those lanterns. She wants to see them for herself. Mother Gothel refuses, but even before we get to Mother Gothel's refusal, we see what Rapunzel's life is like. And that, of course, is how we get the first song of the film, When Will My Life Begin? And whatever else, I would say this movie starts relatively strong. I think the two best songs in the film are the first two songs we hear. The first of them being, When Will My Life Begin? Obviously, part of it, as we'll talk about with the second song, it's funny, before, Matt, you joined, I was acknowledging to Scott that I finally caught up to the film Sinners, the Ryan Coogler film, and my very hot take was, it's a good movie. And my very hot take about Mandy Moore is, she's a pretty talented singer. So, you give Mandy Moore, When Will My Life Begin? This film's version, as Scott acknowledged, of the I Want song. And yeah, it's a good song. It is a solid song. It's a good opener. Again, my arms crossed attitude was, is it as good as Almost There? No. Is it as good as any of the songs the Disney Renaissance that Alan Menken wrote that were similar I Want songs? I would say no, but it is a good song in and of itself. I will happily acknowledge that. We're going to at least start more positive than we get to some of the other songs. So, Matt, I'm curious. Weigh in. What is your take on When Will My Life Begin?
If you take When Will My Life Begin as its own song, it's like, oh yeah, it's reliable Alan Menken. It's got a good melody. It is a solid I Want song in terms of illustrating Rapunzel. I would say that its biggest drawback is that it's fighting with that big prologue, which is from Flynn's perspective, which is just a weird thing. It's one thing to be sort of like, to do like a Beauty and the Beast, where you have sort of this unseen narrator being like, here's how we got the beast, here's how we got the castle, or even like Aladdin with like the merchant and like, here's that. But those are very brief. Whereas Rapunzel kind of belabors a lot of exposition in its prologue, and it's all from a character we haven't even really met yet. And then it's like, and now Rapunzel. And it's like, okay, who are our affinities with? And I think the film is trying to balance it and make it a two-hander, but that also makes things a little difficult in terms of giving us an in to Rapunzel and sort of making us feel like we're on her journey right now. So you have to sort of like switch gears with that song in a way that isn't as narratively elegant as other Disney movies.
I think it is a fair point. There's not as much introduction, but I would also say, what do we know about Belle before she launches into Belle? How different is that? We're basically being introduced to the character and what her situation is immediately through the song. And I think it does exactly the same thing in exactly the same way. And I'm going to do the probably the most controversial thing I will say, which is, I think Glenn Slater is at least he's not trying to do an Ashman impression. He's got his own thing, but the way that he writes with Menken, works. I just think they are, I mean, and of course their partnership extends into other things. They co-wrote the original songs for the Little Mermaid stage adaptation, which I think are also pretty darn good. And the songs for Gallivant, I don't know if either of you were,
I do.
were watching.
Yes.
Okay. And those
Yes.
were some absolutely wonderful songs. And I think that they are I didn't love the show, but I loved the songs. And I think that is what they are, just a good team. That I think that Slater gets how to write to his rhythms, and the animation. And you know, we've, as we started off on this, we talked about the difference between the songs working independently and the songs working in the context of the film. And I think that most of these songs work especially well in the context of the performance of the voice actors singing them, and in the context of the animation. Yeah. And that is the way. Yeah, go ahead.
If I just want to push back sort of to compare it to Belle, because I do think you're right, they serve sort of a similar purpose, but I think Beauty and the Beast sets us up better by having the animation feel different before the film really begins, because we're getting everything through the stained glass prologue, and so even the stylization is very different. We get a few brief shots of life within the castle, but then in a prologue that I believe is much shorter than what we have in Tangled. Maybe it just feels shorter.
Yes. It absolutely is.
But then with Beauty and the Beast, like the colors open up, all of these things. Whereas with Tangled, it feels like the story has really already begun with its prologue. So to me, to shift gears over to When Will My Life Begin, I totally agree. They are doing similar I Want songs, and like I think the lyrics are good. I just feel like with Beauty and the Beast, we get in there a lot faster. And with Tangled, again, there's a lot of setup and changing perspectives in a way that I think you're actually waiting for the film to begin. And you're like, okay, now we're going. Now we're singing.
I see the thing which you did there.
Thank you.
I would also say, I think the other thing I would add about maybe the way it feels different is it's not even just the use of narration, it's the style of narration, by which I mean David Ogden Stiers at the opening of Beauty and the Beast. It's very old-fashioned. It's maybe not literally opening up the storybook as we see in older films like Sleeping Beauty or Cinderella, but it's definitely not meant to feel too modern, shall we say. Whereas, whatever we think of the narration from Flynn Rider, it is meant to be very self-aware, very knowing, very... I believe the comparison I'll make here is very Ryan Reynolds-y in a way. It's meant to be, I know what I'm doing. I'm telling you a story. I'm talking like it has that ultra self-awareness that that for me is why it definitely feels, it's probably only like a minute or two longer than the prologue in Beauty and the Beast. I realize it's not too lengthy, but that's part of what to me drags it down a bit. And I also just generally think Flynn Rider, in the same way that Flynn Rider just can never get his nose right, I'm not as interested in him as a character as I am in Rapunzel or in Mother Gothel, just generally speaking.
I guess I still just don't know what that does to the song. I mean, I obviously we have a different perspective on the songs in general. I just don't see anything about the introduction interfering in the quality, the performance, or the effect of this particular song. It's just weird. It's weird for me to make that leap to, because this thing was there, the song is not working in the same way.
For me, it's a tonal shift. Similar to like how like in Wish, you're like, why do none of these songs sound the same as if they're from the same musical? I think Tangled doesn't have that problem overall. They do sound consistently Menken. But I will say, when you go from the sort of knowing self-awareness of Flynn Rider, which is something I think starts marking the Disney era going forward, like not Winnie the Pooh, but it starts surfacing, sort of like with Wreck-It Ralph, and sort of like, oh, we're in on the joke. Disney is aware. Disney knows. But to go from that modern self-awareness to the very earnest, old-fashioned When Will My Life Begin, it's like switching to a different genre almost. And you're trying to sort of say, can we marry this sort of classic princess story with sort of the wry knowingness of Flynn Rider?
I just don't think it's that earnest. I mean, I just don't. I just don't see it's got its own sort of little quirkiness to it. If it had been the same kind of level of, part of your world. Now that's, to me, that is a quintessentially earnest I Want song.
Yes.
This is closer to Belle in the sense that it's kind of perkier and quirkier. so I just I just don't see it. And by the way, I do appreciate and I do connect with the idea of that it felt for a while that Disney was trying to basically do the DreamWorks face in their care. It was saying like, oh, I guess we need to do that thing where everyone's sort of giving the eyebrow raise to the audience.
Yeah.
And yes, I'm not a fan of that either. So we can connect on some levels.
I think to me what's interesting, and I think one of the reasons why this feels different from movies like Beauty and the Beast or even Little Mermaid, Aladdin, it's not so much that this is the movie where Disney is emulating DreamWorks, thankfully. This feels a lot more like Disney emulating Pixar. I mentioned, I know, Scott, you and I do not see eye to eye in terms of how many songs it feels like this film employs or how sporadically, to me, it may feel that they are utilized. But two things I was reflecting on. For example, yes, there's a Showstopper song, which we will talk about soon. But of course, it is from characters we've basically just met. Because while this movie has wacky animal comic relief in the form of Pascal and Maximus, the one thing that neither of them do, of course, is talk. And so that basically you can't have a show-stopping number like Be Our Guest from characters who we already have a connection to, versus the guys we meet in the tavern. And again, we'll talk about that soon, but I think that choice, along with the fact that for a good chunk of the movie, it feels like, to me, that Rapunzel and Flynn are essentially the mismatched characters on a buddy comedy quest until it turns into a romance. Obviously, it has to. That feels a little more like a Pixar-y touch, and again, certainly different from other princess films. And I'm also willing to acknowledge a person could say how much of that is the case with The Princess and the Frog, with Tiana and Naveen. That kind of is similar, so I won't deny that. But I don't know. It just feels like there's just a different feeling to me. But again, I do want to emphasize, I think Mandy Moore is really good in general in this film. I think that she really does a solid job of getting across the blend of emotions that Rapunzel is feeling as we see her going through what has to be an exhaustingly tedious and dull life in her tower, but trying to keep herself as ebullient and excited and enthusiastic as possible. I do want to emphasize, I do like this song. I think she does a really solid job of performing it. Whatever else is true, I do think that much needs to be emphasized. I have my grouchiness, my crankiness, but not with this song, to be clear. And not with the next song, because one of the smartest touches this movie makes with Mother Gothel is not just that she is clearly a villainess from the outset, but that she is arguably the most passive-aggressive villain in Disney animation history. And Donna Murphy, who, again, hot take, she's talented. Donna Murphy is she is making a feast out of every line of dialogue she has from the outset of, the balance of, oh, you're getting a little chubby. Oh, I'm saying it out of love. Don't be mean. What's wrong? Don't take it so personally. I love you. You're great. Just change. Like it's really a solid performance, which is what makes the film's second song, Mother Knows Best, my absolute favorite in the entire film. Again, Rapunzel wants very badly to leave her tower on her 18th birthday. She wants to see where those mysterious lanterns she sees every year, where are they coming from? But Mother Gothel, obviously for very selfish reasons, doesn't want Rapunzel to ever leave, and she attempts to explain that in Mother Knows Best with this array of absolutely ridiculous things that would seem like they're impossible that they could ever happen. Obviously, some of Rapunzel's adventure feels like a bit of some stuff coming to life, but not in the same way, not actually like terrifying. But I really do think, whatever else I say about this movie, Mother Knows Best, I remember even in theaters listening to it and thinking, this is exactly what I want this whole movie to be like. And I hope this whole movie is like this. And I do not think it is, but I do think this song is a lot of fun. It is really charming. Murphy is great. Again, there's only so many songs in this movie. Two of them appear in the first 15 minutes of the film, and it takes a little while to get the next non-reprise song. I did not clock it, unfortunately for myself, to bolster my point. It feels like it's a good half hour before we get to I've Got a Dream. And it's just a shame because I really like, again, When Will My Life Begin is a solid start. Mother Knows Best feels like it's ramping up in quality. And again, I think the placement of the songs in the film is odd, but this one specifically is really, really great. What do the two of you think?
I mean, is all right if I just
go for it. Yes.
I think it is. I think it is a great song. I think it is only become a greater song over the years as Disney has largely abandoned villains. Or when they have villains, they don't have songs. So this song, it does feel like a demarcate. It is the last, to this point of 2025, great Disney villain song.
Yes.
And it's also, I feel great because of what they do with Mother Gothel, is that she's not the first Disney villain who's a narcissist, but her narcissism is rendered in a, as you said, very passive aggressive way. She's not a narcissist in the same way that Gaston is, or even Ursula. She has her own kind of particular way of being self-centered and being a villainous in a way that we haven't seen before. And this song really does a great job of articulating that, of saying it to a good beat. You've got, of course, Donna Murphy knocking it out of the park. Everything there feels unique. And it's like, yes, this is kind of what I want. This feels like something I haven't seen before out of a Disney film, but still in the vein of a classic Disney musical.
So I'm going to agree that it is the best of all of these songs, and considering the way I feel about all of the songs, I think it's one of the best Disney songs, period. And I think that it works because of all, as I was kind of talking about before, it's the combination of the way Murphy performs it, the way it's placed. The song itself, I think, is structured in such an interesting way. The bounciness of it really works with the idea of who Mother Gothel is in terms of the way she is in her relationship towards Rapunzel. It's always this. It's I think everyone knows one of these people who always says the shittiest thing, but in that little pretty voice that it's like, but I just, it's the bless your heart version of these kinds of things. And sort of the way that she diminishes her to keep her from having any kind of self-confidence, which would in fact lead her to want to leave. And so the song itself is a upbeat, bouncy little song about someone who is psychologically devastating the person that she is responsible for, and lyrically wonderful, and the performance is terrific, and just it's the more I think about this song over the years, it's like this song is dark, but it is dark with that bouncy beat to it, and it's that combination. It just makes it phenomenal.
Yeah, I also love the way that they've animated Mother Gothel. Like she seems to have more teeth than the other characters. Like she's always sort of bearing her fangs in a way.
Yeah, and again, I do want to echo something, Scott, you were saying earlier. I don't know that I would go too far in terms of praising Glenn Slater's overall work. I do like his song, the songs he wrote with Alan Menken on Gallivant, which is a show people should watch if they didn't. I forget if it's still actually streaming on Disney Plus, but it should be because it was an ABC show that did not get enough love back in the day. It's funny though, Scott, you didn't mention that he and Alan Menken had collaborated on another Disney animated film before Tangled.
Yes.
You both know about Home on the Range, right?
Yes.
I know about Home on the Range.
I mean, who doesn't remember Randy Quaid's yodeling song from that movie? And in case you're wondering out there, that's a joke, right? No, it's not. I mean, it is, but not in the way you think.
And on the level of voice people in Disney movies who should be canceled, I think that Roseanne qualifies as a bit higher on the list.
Yes, but also I think Randy Quaid might be jockeying for that title as well. That's going to be a fun movie to revisit one day. But anyway, I do think that the lyrics here specifically are really solid. It's really, again, Donna Murphy is also excellent casting. You can almost look at it as like they kind of cast a couple of ringers. Like, let's not just get anybody to play Rapunzel. Let's get a pop star and actress in Mandy Moore. Let's not just get anybody to play Mother Gothel. Let's get a Broadway legend. And this was years before whatever she must be doing on the Gilded Age. I'm aware that she's on that show, but I don't watch it myself. Point being,
I think she had two Tonys already by the time they got her for Tangled.
Yeah.
Yeah, I was going to say Wonderful Town, and I'm trying to think off the top of my head what the other one would have been for, but she's immensely talented one way or the other. It might be for The King and I suppose. I'm sorry. Actually, I'm looking it up right now. I was wrong that it wasn't Wonderful Town. It was The King and I and her role in Passion. Both 1990s era Tony Award wins for her. But she's excellent. She's amazing. Nothing against Donna Murphy. So after Mother Knows Best, even though Rapunzel is initially very depressed because of that song, because of all the terrors that Mother Gothel has put in Rapunzel's head, she is, she's ready with her frying pan to bonk the head of this ruffian, Flynn Rider, when he arrives in her tower, not to do anything to Rapunzel, but to escape the clutches of the Kingdom Guard. He quickly realizes that Rapunzel is a very special young lady for a lot of reasons. He doesn't realize exactly initially what is going on with Rapunzel's hair, but he desperately he has stolen a crown that actually belongs to Rapunzel, even though neither of them realize that. He wants to get it back. She has it and refuses to tell him unless he brings her to see the floating lanterns. It's a couple of days' journey. He decides to help her out. Rapunzel is able to convince Mother Gothel to go on a even longer journey to get her some paint for her birthday. And the two of them go outside. I believe this is where we get the one reprise within the actual film of When Will My Life Begin, once Rapunzel finally exits the tower. It's fine. It's okay. I'm trying to think off the top of my head, and Scott, you correct me if I'm wrong. I don't know that a lot of the reprises of quintessential I Want songs are remotely as good as the full songs themselves. They're typically, fine. They do the job, and they're not songs you're going to remember automatically relative to the bigger, more complete actual song. But
sure, and these reprises usually last about 12 seconds. So
yeah,
yes,
they exist more as punctuation marks or exclamation points on the original point.
Exactly. So
it's the, I don't know when, I don't know how.
Yeah,
and that's
exactly.
It.
Yep. Yeah. But anyway, so Flynn wants to get his crown back. The crown he thinks is his back. He doesn't really care that much about helping Rapunzel. So when he realizes how fragile she is emotionally and how she is vacillating between extreme joy at being outside of the tower and extreme guilt, because as much as we in the audience all know that Mother Gothel is full of it, she has done quite the number on Rapunzel.
Which is a great montage. I just love this montage.
Yes, that is a good, funny bit. It isn't a song, but it is a good, funny bit all the same. But eventually, because he realizes how frayed she is, he says, I wouldn't want you to come up against any terrifying thugs. Let's go to this place. It's called the Snuggly Duckling. It's going to be fine. Of course, as soon as they get there, it's not just that Rapunzel is not duly scared enough. It's that Flynn has not realized, I'm wanted for theft. Other thugs might want to turn me in to get the reward. And to escape the clutches of these various thugs, a song comes into play, and that song would be I've Got a Dream, which is performed by Mandy Moore, Zachary Levi, Brad Garrett, and speaking of being canceled, Jeffrey Tambor. This is not, I'll tell you this much. I'd forgotten this movie has a very small cast, relatively speaking. There are, outside of like the additional voices list, there are, I believe, a whopping 9 actors in this movie. The aforementioned Zachary Levi, Mandy Moore, Donna Murphy. We got Brad Garrett, Ron Perlman as the Stabbington brothers, Jeffrey Tambor, Richard Keel, MC Gainey as the captain of the guard. If you know Lost, you remember him as Tom from The Others. And my favorite appearance in this film as Short Thug is one of my favorite comedians and improvisers, Paul F. Tompkins. And I just want to mention, by the way, I mentioned Paul F. Tompkins here for one reason. If you've been listening to every episode of this show, you know that when I started this podcast, it was because I was inspired by re-listening to old episodes of You Talking You Two to Me, on which Paul F. Tompkins appeared, because I had read that Scott Aukerman and Adam Scott were going to be doing a Billy Joel podcast. It is the middle of August. I have watched the 2-part Billy Joel documentary. There is no Billy Joel podcast. Scott and Scott, what's going on, guys? I'm sure they're listening to every episode. Just as they wanted you two to show up on that show for 3 hours at a time, I want Scott and Scott on this podcast. That's going to happen, I'm sure, very soon. But seriously, Paul F. Tompkins does show up as the Short Thug. I think it's really funny to hear his voice. I remember even at the time thinking, wait a second, I know you from Comedy Bang Bang. It was he I don't think actually sings in I've Got a Dream, but he does have one of my favorite non sequitur lines when Mother Gothel shows up after the song and he says something to the effect of, I need a drink because you are a tall glass of water. Like that line he gives her before she physically threatens him. But anyway, I've Got a Dream is a song in which we learn what Rapunzel's dream is. We know Flynn's dream is to be very rich. And we get to learn that these terrifying looking thugs are maybe not as terrifying as they seem. Obviously, if we can compartmentalize and leave aside the Jeffrey Tambor aspect, because he does get a verse, as the big nose thug, that is his credited character. I would say, again, this song is okay. It's not even an issue for me of comparing it to other show-stopping comic relief style songs. It kind of goes to my earlier comment. We don't know these guys at all. And although I get the joke of these terrifying dudes have very soft and cuddly types of dreams. I get that. I think that's fine. It's more, I wish that I knew these characters before they started bursting into song. And that, again, that's just the nature of the story. I think it's an interesting choice. It's just not one that I automatically think works very well. What do the two of you think of this song?
Go for it, Matt.
Well, on the one hand, it's not a song that blows me away. It's not a bad song. On the other hand, I don't know how many musical numbers there are that have Richard Keel in them. So for that reason, it is one of the best songs ever made. So, I mean, again, I agree. Yeah, I think to me, the whole, like, we don't know these guys. Again, this all kind of, there seems to be sort of like a structural issue with Tangled in terms of like, who is our perspective? Who are we following? What's going on? And they really sort of invested everything. It's like, okay, it's Rapunzel and it's Flynn. Those are our characters. But I also think that sort of tries to highlight what they're going for tonally, which you can see in the song, which is these are tough guys, but underneath they're soft. And that's sort of a reflection of Flynn and Rapunzel, which is like he's modern and knowing, but actually he's soft and like he needs her sort of earnestness to complete him as a person, to unlock his inner Eugene, as it were. And so again, thematically, I can actually kind of appreciate what the song is doing in terms of moving the two characters to where they need to be. But I agree that there's almost a randomness to it because we don't know these guys. These guys come back later, usefully in the climax of the film, but there hasn't really been any setup, even in terms of like showing us how Flynn knew these guys or knew of this place. It's just sort of inferred that implied that because he is sort of this criminal underworld of the kingdom, he would therefore know all of these guys.
I hear and acknowledge all the things that you say, and I do not care.
Fair.
I do not care at all that I don't know the character. I mean, this is the slightest. I mean, it's musically, it's fairly inconsequential. I mean, it's there's nothing all that interesting musically going on. But again, to me, this works in the context. I just dig the animation and the way that this is presented. All of these characters are so wonderfully grotesque, over the top. That is what makes it work for me. It's the number itself, almost in isolation, but isolation within the context of the movie. Now, would I listen to this one on its own if I just had a playlist? I probably wouldn't in the same way. I don't think this is one that I put on just to listen to the song on its own. But I really enjoy it, watching it and in the context of the movie. And the fact that, I mean, I don't know that you can have it both ways. Either you know who the characters are or you don't know that they're going to reveal this part of themselves. Or should we have known them as potentially scary guys for 30 seconds longer? I just can't wrap my head around. To me, it's just fine that we see someone, we make an initial snap judgment based on their appearance, and then there's more to them. That's fine. I don't care anything more than that.
So two things. One, this is where my comment earlier about it's weird that there are animal sidekicks who don't talk. Obviously, it's not the first time that's happened. I acknowledge that. But in a movie that already has asked me, understandably, to suspend my disbelief about a person's hair having healing powers, it's like, if you'd wanted Pascal and Maximus to talk, they could have had a song like this. Although I suppose the flip side, that could be like that song in Wish, where all the animals are I forget the name of that song because it's a terrible song. The song in that film where they are enchanted and they can now sing, and they sing about being shareholders in the universe, which is still the worst lyric in a Disney song ever. Now, the second thing, Scott, and I think clearly the best argument against this song, and I, again, forgotten about it. This is the song that gave us one of the most obnoxious memes online, the image of Flynn being pointed at by all the 20 different swords before he sings about his dream. I know that's not actually an argument against the song, but I had forgotten, oh, right, that's where that image comes from.
What's an opinion that's got you like this?
My least favorite. Actually, it's probably it may not be my actual least favorite, but it's not one of my favorite memes. Anyway, the point is, we will agree to disagree on this song, such is life. So after this song is over, royal guards show up, the thugs help Rapunzel and Flynn escape. There is a big action sequence that starts with them being stuck in a cave. This is where Flynn first realizes exactly how special Rapunzel and her lengthy hair are. They escape. There's, big action sequence. At this point, Gothel returns because she hadn't actually completed her journey. She realizes that something is up because she sees the satchel with the crown that belongs to Rapunzel with the wanted poster of, I should note, I believe by this point we've learned that Flynn is not really Flynn Rider. His name is Eugene Fitzherbert. We have to make his name sound as nerdy as possible. Obviously, that's why he changed to Flynn Rider, because it's a lot more exciting than Eugene Fitzherbert. Although I do think one of the more charming details of this film, and I don't know why, Mandy Moore saying Eugene is weirdly very charming to hear. I don't know why, but it is. But anyway, so they are attempting to get to the kingdom. Gothel wants to stop them in their tracks. She ends up striking a deal with the Stabbington brothers to get Rapunzel. Gothel, finds Rapunzel. This is where the reprise of Mother Knows Best shows up. There's a bit of an argument. There's, again, this time the passive aggressive aspects of Gothel's personality are gone. It's pretty much just aggressive at this point. And this is where there's not just some more action. They finally get into the kingdom of Corona. I don't think I named the kingdom before, but that's the name of it. And there is going to be a festival because, of course, they are there on the day that the floating lanterns will be unleashed, when they'll be let go into the sky. And as this day is going on, it's very clear that Rapunzel and Eugene are becoming a little enamored of each other. They have looked at each other and realized, hey, we're both very pretty people, and you're charming, and so are you. So they're falling in love. And that evening, that leads to them being on sailing onto a lake. The lanterns are being released, and they are singing conveniently, I See the Lights. And I think in some way, in the same way that comedy is subjective, music is subjective. You hear a song and you can acknowledge, I get what this song is going for. I understand it. It's fine. And I realize Scott disagrees. I'm sure that Scott is going to tell me why I am wrong, and that's fine. I think this song is fine. I don't think that this song is as effective as I know it's trying to be. And again, I realize that this is probably an unpopular opinion. This is the sole song that received an Academy Award nomination. I get that it's a well-liked song. I understand it. It's just one of those things where I understand it in concept. Just for me in execution, it's okay. It's just not quite as successful to me as I know it's trying to be, and as I'm sure it is for you, Scott. Matt, before I let Scott talk, Matt, what do you think of I See the Lights?
I'm kind of with you. It's like, it's a pretty song, but like, again, and perhaps it's unfair to ask Disney to sort of, well, you've got to keep topping yourself. I mean, you can't just have, a whole new world. You have to do better than that. And like, it's really hard to keep coming up with like film, like these sort of, in terms of not just a showstopper, but a love song between your two, your two leads, and saying, is this going to be magical? And sometimes you just fall short. It's not a train wreck of a song. It's, like I said, it's very pretty. It just doesn't transport me in the way that would something like A Whole New World or Can You Feel the Love Tonight would. I don't. I'm not saying like, if you love it. I'm not going to be like, no, that's wrong.
It is. We've talked about both of those. Obviously, we've talked about Aladdin. We've talked about The Lion King. I actually don't like "Can You Feel the Love Tonight" as a song, so it's odd for me to have that comparison because I don't
Sure.
actually think that. But I think that there is something for me, and perhaps, and this is, I think, indicative of the fact that I enjoyed the entire film as a whole, clearly more than either of you do. That I think that these are not necessarily all playlist songs for me, but they are songs that work in their. The lantern sequence, I think, is beautiful, and I think that is what elevates the song. I do think it is quite a lovely song, and there aren't as many love ballads that are duets as there really should be when you think about it, in that that most of the Disney love songs are not. Well, maybe if you actually set them aside, there'd be 50-50. I don't know, but it doesn't feel like there are as many of them. Maybe the performance, if you include the pop music performance of Beauty and the Beast rather than the Angela Lansbury version. But I like that it's actually a duet, and I think that it's a song that there needed to be a little bit of that earnestness, because I think the other ones were cutesier, and I think it's, again, just in the context where we're actually finding a moment of connection, and the way that's represented visually as well is what makes the whole package work for me.
And that's fair. I will say, I know that, similar to the comment you made earlier, about the entire sequence, kind of the visual aspects. I know that when the film came out, I remember a lot of people talking about the visual aspects of this sequence. And again, in my sour Andy Rooney-esque, look Andy Rooney up, kids, vibe, I was like, if only there was a Disney animated film with characters on a bayou, for example, and lots of lights and such during a big musical sequence, like in The Princess and the Frog. Like, that was one of those things. Also, it's so weird, by the way, now to think about the fact that The Princess and the Frog, for example, has a lot more presence at the Disney theme parks than Tangled does, which is so weird to me, because I get to be a bit of a hipster where it's like, where were all of you people in 2009? Where was Disney in 2009 giving this film its own attraction? And it's so odd to me what does or doesn't stick. Like, again, part of me loves it because I love The Princess and the Frog. But it's just weird because if you look at the numbers, it's like, but Tangled should be the one getting more presence, and it's a little odd that it doesn't.
Well, here's this is a tiny diversion, but indulge me a moment. I think that there actually was presence of Tiana and Facilier in New Orleans Square for quite a while. And I think that contributed to this ongoing awareness in a way that not having, a walk around. I mean, there would be an occasional appearance of your Rapunzel at the, in a parade, or, she would be in some of the meet and greets. But I think that Tiana was around a lot. And so I think they actually did, whether it was just leaning into the fact that we needed a little bit of diversity in our princesses and actually making that work. Tiana would ride around on the Mark Twain, and so there was a lot. I think that there was an opportunity there that they could see because they had built it. They actually put in the work after the fact, which is weird, but I appreciate it.
I mean, yes, and I will say I have picture proof. When my older son was younger, we waited in line dutifully to meet Rapunzel and Flynn Rider, and my wife and I were both like, "You've never seen Tangled. Why do you want to meet those characters?" But okay, sure, why not? It was, yes. I mean, you're not wrong, to be clear, but I think there was also a difference between the initial, like, it just came out, the bloom is right off the rose, versus. I mean, I think there are a lot of reasons why Tiana's Bayou Adventure is what's in Critter. Well, it's not called Critter Country anymore, right? It's
Bayou Country.
It's Bayou Country. Why not just New Orleans Square? Whatever. Anyway, so I See the Light again. It's okay. It is an okay song. I think it's funny. I like Can You Feel the Love Tonight more than Scott does, but also it's definitely not my favorite of the love ballads of the era, to be clear.
I also do want to be clear. It's not like, I was just saying, like, in terms of, like, if we're looking at films that, like, the songs that won the Oscar.
Right. For sure. Yes. That is true. And again, I will briefly note, again, I See the Light was nominated for Best Original Song. And Scott, I'm sure you recall the song that won that year because we've already talked about it on this podcast.
I know, I know we did, and yet I didn't do my. I don't remember. I don't remember which year that was or what it was. If it
Okay.
was one of the Toy Stories or I don't know. I don't even remember
Well,
where we are at this point.
so the other nominees that year were If I Rise from 127 Hours and Coming Home from Country Strong. And yes, Scott, the winner was from Toy Story 3, We Belong Together. Obviously, because the Oscars realized that Randy Newman should have won for The Princess and the Frog the previous year, so they gave him that. No, I know that's not why, but he did get 2 nominations the previous year for The Princess and the Frog. Sadly, did not win. No, We Belong Together did win. I will say I don't love I See the Light, but if I look at those 4 nominees, I probably would have given the Oscar to I See the Light of those 4 songs because. The funny thing is, I know I saw 127 Hours in theaters. I am trying to remember off the top of my head what Country Strong is. Okay, it is a movie starring Gwyneth Paltrow and Tim McGraw that I don't think I saw.
Was that a Diane Warren? Was that a Diane Warren song?
It was not, Scott. Can you believe it? It was not a Diane Warren song. That was a song written by Tom Douglas, Hillary Lindsay, and Troy Verges, who are people who I've just said their names of right now, and I've never heard of them before. But yeah, it was not. It was one of the rare years in the 21st century when Diane Warren did not come into play at the Oscars. After I See the Light, there is again the big climactic sequence when Rapunzel realizes that she is the lost princess of Corona. She confronts Gothel. There is a big fight. Eugene is stabbed by Gothel. And of course, Rapunzel sacrifices, she is willing, Rapunzel, to sacrifice her own life, to remain in captivity with Gothel, to save Eugene. And okay, and this is where it's not a song part, but the thing that I did remind myself that I don't love about the end of this movie. It's not the fact that the movie ends with Rapunzel's hair being cut off. It's the fact that Eugene makes that choice for her by cutting off her hair as kind of a final act before he assumes he's going to die. There is, of course, a little bit more magic left because one of Rapunzel's tears lands on his cheek and revitalizes him. Again, it's one of those things where it's like, shouldn't that be Rapunzel's choice to cut off her hair? I don't even disagree with the choice. It feels a little bit like her being robbed of that agency, but I also know that that's what has to happen to get us to the happy ending. Gothel dies, and I will say Gothel's death is one of the more weirdly enjoyably fanciful touches because there's this, as Rapunzel's hair is cut off, obviously all of her magic has evaporated. Thus, Gothel is aging a la the guy at the end of Indiana Jones and the Last Crusade, basically turning into a pile of dust, but doing so while she falls off the tower. It's really clever. It's really well done. Even if I don't love the whole Eugene cutting off her hair piece. That's me. That's a me issue.
By the way, we've kind of passed over the healing incantation. Does that not count as a song?
That's the thing. It's like
it does,
it's
but
a song,
it's
very short. But I think like a song has sort of like it's not just separate; that it becomes diegetic to the to the story.
Yes, I think it's cleverly used throughout. It's funny though, the version of the song that stands most in my head is one that's much earlier in the movie when Rapunzel is trying to move things along so quickly that she basically does like a rat-a-tat version of the incantation so that we can move, that's the version that I remember more than the one at the very end, even though that's the version that is obviously much more emotional, much more tender. And again, Mandy Moore does a fine job with it, but again, it's almost the equivalent of a reprise of a song where it's like, it's so short that it feels not superfluous because it's obviously very critical to the story, but also not standing out in the same way. At least for me. Either of you, feel free to weigh in.
Yeah, it's fine.
Okay, you brought it up, so that's why I wasn't sure.
Well, I didn't know if we were counting it for soundtrack purposes. It just seemed.
Yeah, it does technically count. It's a good point. And then, so again, movie ends happily ever after. Eugene is back. Rapunzel and Eugene fall in love. She is reunited with her parents. He is pardoned. They marry happily ever after, leading into the final song of the film that plays over the end credits. It is kind of similar to how, speaking of The Princess and the Frog, that movie ends with Never Knew I Needed a Song that is performed by Neo. Here we get, what is it called? Something That I Want by a singer named Grace Potter, who I am not familiar with outside of this song. And, It's a okay pop song. It's all right. I think as I was listening to it, though, I was thinking, gee, it's a shame that your movie's lead actor isn't a pop singer, because boy, it'd be nice if she sang a song, right? Like,
Yeah.
and also thinking about the Renaissance era stuff as well as upcoming films like Frozen, where it's like, why don't you have somebody singing like a pop music version of When Will My Life Begin? Or I've Got a Dream, or I See the Light. It's an odd choice. What did the two of you think of, though, the actual song we get? What did the two of you think of Something That I Want? Was it something that you wanted?
It's a nice little song to like lead us out of the theater, I guess. It's like, again, it is sort of like, oh, okay, I guess they didn't have like a scene to put this with. And there are, I mean, I guess they could have done a poppy version, but then, maybe they're like, well, if we do 6 songs, we get another bite at the apple in terms of potential Oscar nominations or what have you. I don't know. It's fine. A lot of my feelings about this movie are, it's fine.
and I'm going to actually be I agree. This isn't, it's fine. In fact, this is my confession. When I first saw this, I started exiting as the credits were like, oh, there's a song. And it started playing, and I'm listening for a few minutes, and then I left before it ended because I really wasn't interested. I realized it was not Mandy Moore, and it was not something that I particularly was interested in hearing. But I think this actually connects very strongly and will lead in well to talking about the cover versions, the cover corner, which is this is really a movie where the movie versions of the songs are what works for me. And the fact that this is just some tag on, it doesn't work. It just doesn't work because I wanted that visual. I wanted those connections. And so I'm going to say right now, before we get into it, as I started dabbling around in some of these, it's like, there is not a single one of these things I wanted to listen to the end of. Not a single
Wow. One. Now here, before we do cover corner, I do want to acknowledge that while I See the Light did not win the Oscar, it did win a Grammy for Best Song Written for Visual Media, and I love the other nominees because this is a fascinating glimpse into early 2010s culture. There were 5 other nominees the year that I See the Light won in 2012 Grammys because of their weird timing and schedules, whatever. The other nominees were, weirdly, from Family Guy, a song called Christmas Time Is Killing Us, performed by Seth MacFarlane and Bruce McGill. Bruce McGill of the Insider and all sorts of other, like, okay then. There's a song from Footloose called Where the River Goes, performed by Zach Brown. Speaking of Winnie the Pooh, So Long, performed by Zooey Deschanel and M. Ward, a very charming song at the end of that film's credits. And speaking of Diane Warren, there is not one but 2 nominations for Diane Warren. One from Justin Bieber, Never Say Never, a song called Born to Be Somebody, and my favorite, performed by Cher, from the film Burlesque. You haven't seen the last of me. You guys remember Burlesque?
I do remember Burlesque.
I do remember Burlesque.
Oh boy. But yeah, so I'm going to be honest with you, Scott. Now, I did a little bit of digging into Cover Corner, and aside from me realizing, hey, some of the songs in this movie have very generic titles, which does not make it super easy to find covers of them, because I See the Light and I've got a Dream. That's a really hard song to figure out covers of. And it's like, well, you know what? It turns out that dreams are a big theme in a lot of different songs. I didn't really find any covers of note, honestly. What about you? Whether they were good or not, I'm saying.
No. So basically, we've talked a lot about the ones that were actually recorded, whether for, some of these Disney compilation albums, the Los Lobos, or some of these others that you had. And there was really nothing along those lines. Now, a lot of those came out earlier. A lot of those came out late 90s, early 2000s. So this kind of was on the tail end of when Disney was doing a lot of that stuff or licensing a lot of that stuff. So, but, you have a lot of, someone in their home studio trying to, belt out, I See the Light, and, or doing a violin version while traipsing through mountain flowers. And it's like, I want the movie version. None of them, again, I did not actually stick it out till the end of any of them.
Well, There you go. So, I mean, I don't have anything else to say about the songs of this movie. Do either of you have any other kind of broader, holistic comments you'd want to mention about these songs?
Nothing really. You guys probably answered this better than I can. Is this the last Menken or did he work on Moana as well? Like,
no,
no.
Moana was everybody's good friend, the star of the upcoming theatrical release of Hamilton, because who hasn't been jonesing for that? Yes, Lin-Manuel Miranda wrote the songs there. I'm going to look it up because I know obviously Alan Menken has been, like, he's worked on some of the absolutely hideous remakes. Unfortunately, it's not his fault.
I think he contributed something to like the live action Little Mermaid, I want to say.
Yes, so he also wrote, it's funny, I just reminded myself, he wrote a couple of songs in Ralph Breaks the Internet, In This Place and a place called Slaughter Race. But yes, that's the one that Sarah Silverman sings, with, I believe, Gal Gadot. But yeah, aside from that, I will say he did recently, reunite with Glenn Slater. They wrote the songs to the film Spellbound, which means they also reunited with everybody's favorite Hawaiian shirt-clad gentleman, John Lasseter, because it was from Skydance Animation. Skydance!
Oh boy.
Congratulations to Skydance. You got all your mergers in. Good for you guys. That's cool.
Skydance. There's no one we won't work with.
Now, I'll admit, I have not seen Spellbound. It's got an impressive cast, if nothing else. It's got everybody from Rachel Zegler and Nicole Kidman to Nathan Lane and John Ratzenberger. So I don't know if either of you have seen that movie, if you can speak to the quality of those songs. But
weirdly, no. Although I've been
heard about this movie for the first time, so no.
No, and I've been doing a lot of the Netflix originals, and yet I somehow missed this. It was just, it was the holiday season last year, so it was busy, but still,
But yeah, so he did. I will say, Matt, though, to your earlier comment, he did compose the music to a couple of new songs with lyrics by the aforementioned Lin-Manuel Miranda. And I would love to pretend like I remember those songs well, but I don't. I've tried to forget that movie entirely. But yeah, so it's not really his final hurrah overall, because he's worked regularly in the last 15 years, at least adding a couple of songs here and there. I'm just reminding myself. He wrote Star Spangled Banner for Captain America, the First Avenger. He wrote at least one song for that. I hated Sausage Party, but it's a movie that he worked on. Apparently he wrote songs or at least music for Mirror Mirror, the Tarsum Singh version of Snow White. I've seen that movie. I don't remember the music of it at all, but again, he's worked, and as Scott mentioned, he wrote songs for Gallivants. He also at least wrote one song for the now late Apple TV animated show Central Park. Apparently, I don't remember a specific song that he wrote with Glenn Slater there, but he did. So yeah, I mean, this, in some ways, it does feel like the final Disney hurrah for him, which is weird because, again, this movie, my opinion of it aside, it was a successful film at the box office. So it's kind of weird that Disney, I mean, obviously it pales in comparison to Frozen, relatively speaking, but it did do well enough, obviously, to prove that a film like Frozen could work. Here, the one thing I'll also note, as much as Scott and I are big Disney theme park people, one thing I know I've never done is go on to a Disney cruise. And I mention that because apparently there is not only a stage adaptation on the Disney Cruise Line of Tangled, but apparently they wrote 3 new songs for that show. One of them is called Flower of Gold. I will let the two of you guess what the topic of that song is. The second one is Wanted Man. I think we can all assume who sings that song. And When She Returns. Now, again, I have not been on that. I've not heard those songs. Maybe they're enjoyable. And obviously, me having groused about the relative minimal amount of songs here.
Yes, paucity, if you will.
Fancy word, thank you. I will. And the funny thing is, by the way, it says it's only an hour-long show, which doesn't surprise me relative to some of the other stage adaptations. Like, Scott and I'm guessing, Scott, you've seen the Aladdin musical that used to be yeah, right. If you know that show, it is a lot shorter than the movie, but also I believe it has at least 1 or 2 new songs in that, or 1 or 2 songs that are not in the film version of Aladdin. So I would be curious to hear these other songs because they're from the guys who wrote the songs here. Maybe they are maybe they are missing from the movie in some capacity. But anyway, that I think is it for Tangled. And I know, Scott, you're going to highlight it here in a second. This is actually our last episode of the first season, if you will, of Mousterpiece Melodies. Podcasts do seasons now, right? That's a thing. So that's the end of the season. We're ending on a spirited debate in many ways. So
were we ever so young a few months ago?
It is genuinely hard to believe that we've been doing this since March, and it's been a long year. I'll say that. But Scott, why don't you take us out?
So with that, it is time to turn down the volume on Mousterpiece Melodies for a few extra weeks. And what will be on the playlist for our first episode of season 2? Cinderella. And while you wait, make sure you subscribe to the show on iTunes, Spotify, or wherever you download your podcasts so you can know when that new episode is coming. Matt Goldberg, thank you so much for joining us today. I know we mentioned your credits at the top of the show, but as a reminder, can you please let listeners know where they can find you and your work on the internet?
Yeah, sure. I'm a freelance writer. You can find my work on Letterboxd with Paste, but mostly I write for my newsletter called Commentary Track, which you can find at commentarytrack.net. Thank you guys so much for having me on. I really appreciate it.
Of course, we were delighted to have you in what ended up being kind of our own version of like Who's Afraid of Virginia Woolf. We were arguing with each other in this episode more than usual. I don't know if that makes me, my own comparison makes me George or Martha. I don't know if there's a flattering version of that. Anyway, I will say, just to add to what Scott was saying, we will not be gone for too long, relatively speaking. I would say if you are subscribed to us, you can expect a new episode, let's say end of September. But we wanted to give you all give you a bit of a break, give ourselves a bit of a break. So anyway, we'd love for you to listen along with us. Tell us what you think. Do you love the songs of Tangled? Are you with Scott? Are you with Matt and I in saying they're okay, they're fine? Do you hate these songs? Even I do not hate these songs. That would be pretty harsh. There can't possibly be a song here nearly as bad as This Is the Thanks I Get, speaking of villain songs in recent Disney films that are not good. If you have any comments, questions, or opinion you'd like to share, you can always reach me at masterpiececinema@gmail.com. You can follow me on Blue Sky at Masterpiece. Scott, where can our listeners find you online?
You can find me on Letterboxd at Scott Renshaw. You can find me on Blue Sky at Scott Renshaw. And you can find my ongoing reviews of new theatrical and most major streaming service releases at cityweekly.net. I'm Scott Renshaw.
And I'm Josh Spiegel, and we'll see you all next time on Mousterpiece Melodies.